going to try to start seriously getting out of that cycle, because it's not what we should be doing. Those dollars are technically one-time dollars. They should be spent on one-time expenses. They shouldn't be plugging holes in our operating budget. So reducing our reliance on those by $2 million. And then, as I said a bit ago about reversion funds going into capital improvement, finally starting to put some significant amount of money into pay-go toward capital improvement. And I'll show you how that works out a little bit when we talk about capital improvement program.
And I'm excited about this. If you follow school board, I'm pretty fiscally conservative when we're voting on money and tax raises and everything. So this is very important, because you should never run a budget. We don't run our home budgets by using one-time money to pay for mortgage and all that stuff. So this is going to really do a lot for doing a budget that should be done in a fiscally responsible way, in my opinion. So I love this.
And our budget gaps have been closing over time.
Yeah,
so our reliance, but also because of trimming the budget, the reversion funds have also been smaller from year to year as well. So how does that break down? Expenditures by type. So sort of this big swath on the bottom here is all personnel. This is pay and benefits for personnel. As our CFO said, we are a very labor-intensive organization, which makes sense. We are in education. We're talking about teachers in classrooms helping students. So about 85% of our budget is just that. 50% left goes to things like fuel for buses, utility bills, instructional materials. And of that 15%, about 2% of it is really discretional money that we can make some sort of determination of what to do with. So there's not a lot of money to, I guess, quote, play with as a school board from budget cycle to budget cycle, when you consider that 85% is just in making sure that we have the personnel that we need. The slide from YouTube wasn't clear enough, so I took a picture of my budget book last night to kind of sort of walk through. So kind of a brief rundown. This is where the school board spends most of its time budgeting. This is sort of our balance sheet. And so this is what we're starting out with, a superintendent estimate of needs. So on the revenue side, we're expecting federal revenues to stay about $2.2 million. From the state side, it looks like we're looking at losing about $700,000. State sales tax, $1.6 million more. The largest increase in what we're seeing is actually the funding that we get from the revenue sharing formula that we have with the city, and that comes out to $16.3 million more over the previous year. We're using $2 million less in reserves, so we start out with $15.2 million more to look at how to place in the school division. We also found some savings and baseline adjustments, which is a lot of like administrative cuts. VRS, the Virginia retirement contribution rate went down and saved us some money. And then we reduced 19 custodial positions based on new staffing allocations. So really what we started out with was about $20 million in this budget to try to use. And so all the items that we sort of just talked about then balance out those. So the experience step increase, cost of living, cost is $10.2 million. The unified pay scale adjustments, $10.5 million. Unified pay scale adjustments, $2 million. Technology initiative getting us to that one-to-one device for students, about $1.5 million. The additional instructional positions, the lower class size is $2.1 million. The additional counselors coming out to about $1 million. Technology support technicians, about $250,000. The instructional technology specialists, about $500,000. Additional school buses, about $700,000. Additional funds for transportation, the 8 white fleet vehicles. So these are some of the vehicles that can be used for those small trips around the city. We're looking about $500,000 there. Special education is getting about $500,000 in additional funding. Security software for the devices that we're issuing, which I'm hoping it's a software that we heard about a couple of weeks ago that lets parents monitor usage. The devices that we get, parents are going to be able to monitor the usage of those devices, seeing exactly where their students are going online, and even blocking sites that we're not already blocking. Within our school division, we have blocking software that's always kept up to date. Outside of the school division on private networks, there's still software for security, but it's not kept as up to date. And so this is something that I think parents are really going to like, so that they have a bit more of a comfort level of those devices in their homes being used. And then providing additional administrative and security support for the Thorogood swing space balances out the budget of using those $20 million.
I don't know how much more that you have on your slides, but
I
with
just-
20 minutes,
I
I'll
have,
make
cap
sure that
I have
we
capital
some-
improvement, and I think we will have good discussion afterwards.
Okay, good.
So,
That's good.
I just,
I want to get some
absolutely.
input and some questions for budget time to take back to this.
So the second part of our budget process is really our capital improvement plan. I just have a few slides on this, reviewing where we are. Right now, we're in the middle of 3 projects, the modernization of John B. Dye, Thurgood Elementary School replacement, and Princess Anne Middle School replacement. So John B. Dye should be done in 2019, Thurgood 2020, and Princess Anne Middle School in 2021. We're doing things like energy performance contracts. That's essentially a guaranteed ROI on those energy projects. 21st century learning environments, doing some library renovations. We are looking to sell in the near future the office, the building off of Glasson Road that's being used for office space right now, consolidating those people into who's at the Plaza building. And that's a construction project that's been added to our capital improvement plan, playground replacement, and then of course the next big project is the Princess Anne High School replacement, and after this year it should be 83 of 127 million funded. This year we're putting $47.4 million into our capital improvement program. Most of that money comes from charter bonds, some of it from the Sandbridge TIF. We're trying to do PAYGO again this year with that $500,000 that we're taking and putting into capital improvement. We hope. The goal here that's being presented to us is to get the $5 million in the next 6 years of at least funding for that to speed up our process of modernizing and replacing buildings. And sort of what's next on the budget process. So February 6th, we got the estimate of needs and the capital improvement program. From February to March, we'll have budget workshops. March 7th, we approve the budget. Within that timeline too, there will be public hearings on the budget that, of course, if you have something you'd like to talk about the budget, we'd love to hear from you. Get sent to the city. We present it to the city council by May 15th, approves the municipal budget. Within this timeline, of course, you've also got the General Assembly that's looking at education funding, and sometimes you don't exactly know what they're going to end up doing. There's some talk about possibly, there's a 2% raise funded by the state that's supposed to start in December of 2018. There's some talk about maybe sliding that up to July, so that would be 6 months of additional funding for compensation that we would be able to use. And that is all my slides.
And I want to say, listening to us, you would think that, we have a perfect school system. Yay, 'cause, we're the cheerleaders of the school system, but we don't. And so, and we realize that, but I want to say I'm just such a public education advocate. My grandfather was a superintendent, my other grandfather was a principal. I would not have sent, my 5 children, because of economics, obviously I would have sent 5 children to public school, but I would definitely not let my granddaughter go to public schools if I didn't know how strong our public schools were for my 5 children. But there are issues that we need to work on. And so, we welcome that input. Lately, I always hear about special education, that's why I'm always on that. Lately, we've heard a lot about discipline. And it just kind of goes in waves. And now we're hearing a lot from certain communities, Thurgood and Hermitage, that community, because something's impacting them. And then sometimes we'll hear something from another community. So I know we're not perfect, and y'all hear things out there, so we want to get your input. And then, right now we want to get questions, but anything that you have concerns with, please share, because we can only get better if we hear about it. And hear from people in the trenches, hear from teachers and stuff. So we'll open it up for questions, and then afterwards, we have our notes, and if you have any concerns or points you want to make, please let us know.
Are we moderating the questions, or does someone usually
Yes,
take that?
unless they get
Okay.
Carolyn.
Oh, I know, it's group. Hey, I'm in the middle of kidney stones. You never know what's going to come out of me. If my pain starts, you'll be like, I'll be nice.
You can moderate.
All right, it's all questions at this table, so.
On your special ed, what portion of the budget is special education? And of that, what portion is for severe and profound and those teacher ratios?
We are going to have to get back with you.
Okay.
Because And that's where the average cost of special ed is somewhat misleading, and I guess we could get a breakdown from severely, you know, we have the Princess Anne Annex over there at Princess Anne High School, which is severely, it's kids in wheelchairs, trach tubes, one-on-one nurses, and then we have special ed, a child who has attention deficit. So, I'm not sure what that is, but I will, Beverly, yeah, we'll get back to that. It's a huge amount.
What the separation is, I would say one of my biggest
Yeah.
issues with, as far as public policy regarding special ed is that in order to sort of have laws and policies that affect all special education children and maybe not to offend anyone, there's no legal separation between those that have severe cases and those that maybe just have, you know, if it exists a mild case of dyslexia or autism. And so that's a challenge, I think, in the special ed field and for policymakers is that we oftentimes aren't looking at those breakdowns either because it's not really mandated or provided. But I think we should be able to pull those numbers.
Yeah, we can get that.
If I could
I'm
just-
writing questions.
I just want to insert something because I'm in the school system, I'm a speech path, and we have to generate Medicaid funding, as do the OTs, the PT, the nursing staff, et cetera. And between September and April of last year, or this year, over $600,000 was generated through our additional paperwork, for which we're not paid, but anyhow, that additional paperwork, and it went into the general fund. Now, that's a question I've had a number of times, and I had it at the Virginia Department of Education, ask why does that additional funding goes into the general fund versus going into SPED by itself, and the answer was from the state that it goes for salaries. So, I mean, that may be
I just got that question the other day too, that is the exact question, and that was on my notes to find out from our budget why there isn't such a separate special education instead of so much of it going to the general fund.
And Carolyn, if I may, question number 2 was, my first job here when I got out of the Marine Corps was working at GEX up here in the corner,
Right?
and which was, of course, zone commercial. We just had a transaction. What was the assessment of that property when you all decided to sell it to the developer for these lower income apartment buildings?
Was it 3.5 assessed? I think we sold it right at, I think it was 3.5 and we sold it for.
No, the assessment
Oh,
value.
the assessment?
Oh, not the appraisal, but the
Oh,
assessment.
the appraisal, I don't know, but I'll
Yeah,
get that
appraisal,
for you.
appraisal assessment, yeah.
But I think it was
I would
3.5.
have to look at it. I'm
But
pretty-
I'll get that for you, yeah, and
Okay.
and we just sold it, and they're gonna make, apartments,
Yeah.
I think there,
Okay.
Yeah, I know that there was some consternation among some about the selling price for that property.
Right.
I will say if we had gotten a full value offer for that entire parcel, that we would have jumped at that opportunity. The reality is that just didn't exist.
Yeah, I think it was 4.5, and then we got,
I-
we'll look it up, I think it was 4.5,
Okay.
we got 3.5. And then we were kind of counseled not to divide that property up, because we thought, with half of it, it would be harder to sell, the real estate folks, so.
Right. Screaming?
A couple of years ago, there was a lot of discussion about teenage and high school age kids. We were talking about improving their performance and everything that you talked about. And it was determined from studies that high school kids don't do well early in the morning, and they need to adjust the time in which they attend classes. And my daughter was a Virginia Beach graduate and had that same problem. And as we worked our way through the process, we were told, well, the reason we can't do that is we need to put lights on all the ball fields, because we don't have lights and kids can't play sports if we shift the high school kids, yada, yada. And I heard nothing in any of these discussions today of anything that you talked about addressing funding the additional lights on the ball fields so that you can improve the performance of high school students by allowing them to have start times that are later in the day, which would affect everyone. And in addition, there was $20 million turned back over to the city council at the end of the last school budget on top of the full day kindergarten funds that weren't used. So, what happened? Why are lights on the ball fields not included in your CIP in your budget so that you can change the time for high school students and improve their performance?
The items I showed were considered new projects as part of that CIP presentation. I do believe that part of our reversion resolution did include money for some of those lighting projects.
350,000, and that will do one.
And we have our CIPs with us if you want to take a deeper look
Well,
at
but
that.
it's
But I will
broader.
also say that
Why are we dragging it out rather than just getting it done?
that is a conversation that the board could obviously have in this balancing process. And I will say that I am a little bit, personally, a little bit more resistant to making that a priority over some of the other things we're looking at. But I'm open to that conversation. I will say we also changed policy to allow us to raise some private funds for those projects as well. So I think there is a general consensus on the board to want to move forward on this, but not do it in a way that harms some of the other priorities that we're looking at.
Yeah.
But I think it's a valid point to have during our budget
We
conversation.
talked about it at retreat, and the final number was either $8 or $9 million, $8.6 million to do that. And y'all know, sports have been good to me. Sports paid for my college, my son's college, my daughter's college. I am probably the most sporty person on the board. But I
Probably
said-
the least sporty person.
Yeah, it makes a good team. Conservative.
Let's not go there.
But and I'm with Joel, we've got so many needs, I don't know if I can justify $8 million for life, or however much it was for life.
It's not about the lights, it's
Well,
about
okay.
kids being able to get to
Well,
school.
if we're just looking at totally educational progress, you're exactly right. But we're looking at people who daycare issues, sports is, I mean, some of these kids, your parents, their child is going to college because of their sports. No other reason, and because they can't afford it. So we're hearing from parents who don't have the daycare issue, the transportation, the sports, the jobs. My son, you know, I'm a single mom, and my high school son has to work so I can have diapers on the table for his younger sibling. So it's very complex. But you're right, if we're just looking at the total education, you are correct.
And when you talked about reversion funds, you stressed it should be a one-time thing, you don't put it in your budget to pay the light
Yeah,
bill
that
or
would be
mortgage.
excellent.
This would be the perfect candidate
Yes,
for
it
a
would be.
reversion fund, because it's a one-time expense, and and the studies that you provided said it will improve performance for high school kids. I just don't understand the logic if that's what
Well,
we're-
Yes, but so there's two factors there. One is academic performance, the other side is that there are safety issues that are cited with students being on the roads in the mornings and such. So those are important things. What I think when you're looking at prioritizing issues, I don't, again, personally, not speaking on behalf of the board, I don't see this as an acute issue that this is something if we don't take care of this year, that we're going to face significant issues. I think the long-term idea is, yes, we want to get there, but we don't necessarily want to do things like not replace aging school buses that are off replacement cycle, because we think that is an acute operational and safety issue that as we're transporting students. So I mean, in budget priorities, and everyone knows this in your home budgets too, you have to set some priorities, and sometimes the level of those priorities are very close.
Yeah.
And you've got to make some excruciating decisions. And you know, if someone wants to come, and I'm even happy to throw that out in our budget discussion, saying, hey, has anyone thought of, you know, instead of doing this, you know, doing this to speed up the process for the lights? I think that's a valid conversation to have.
And we were phasing it in 3 years. We were talking about phasing it.
Yeah.
Just kind of like we did kindergarten, and that's another subject, because some people are like, okay, well, now that we've done kindergarten, let's hurry up and get it done, because you've got, you know, Kingston Elementary, that'll probably be one of the last schools to get full-day kindergarten because of their socioeconomics, but yet they have 28 people in their kindergarten class. You know, so it's just, you know, it's crazy. But I want to do some more research too on the age thing, because my whole thing is, you know, with my kids, then when they're 18 and go to college, does their brain completely change because they all have 8 o'clock classes? You know, so that's the kind
I
of
would
thing.
avoid 8 o'clock classes
Yeah.
myself.
Well, if you have jobs in college or sports, you have 8 o'clock, 5 days a week. My daughter has 6:30 classes up at Liberty.
And don't forget private partnerships that.
That's the policy.
Yeah,
started.
Yeah.
And we're opening that up to the,
Yeah.
to the
Yeah, so
private
that'll
partnerships.
help
Yes, sir.
that.
We'll try to
Okay.
get the answer shorter. I know that we're.
Okay, now I've been retired for 3 years, so my experience is not real recent, but the teachers I talk to, the still in the throes, discipline is a significant issue. And to the extent where they don't feel they can you know, adequately do the curriculum, And we have a state-of-the-art facility right around the corner here that I've heard is underutilized to the extent that they're renting out parts of the building.